Hey, 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 happy Tuesday. Come on in, pull up a chair. The Gaming Gang Dispatch is in the air. Howdy, gang, and welcome once again to the Duct Tape Studios. I'm Jeff McAleer, your host, here at the Gaming Gang Dispatch, brought to you by, shockingly enough, thegaminggang.com, of which I happen to be the founder and editor-in-chief, and even more shockingly enough, Roll for Combat. Zoinks! We will talk a bit more about our sponsor in just a few moments. But welcome aboard, everybody. Tonight is Tuesday, September 24th, 2024. This is live show 1103. If you're not overly familiar with the show, let me point out, super casual around here. Just hanging out, talking about the latest in tabletop gaming news. And then I will normally pontificate about a topic related to our hobby, which I shall be tonight. In fact, tonight we'll be talking about ways that you can bring the Old West to life in role-playing games at your table. So stay tuned for that. But of course, that'll be after we tackle the tabletop gaming news of the day. And of course, keep in mind, like I said, super casual. We are certainly not engaged in anything like rocket surgery or anything like that. Just kind of mellow, chill, just having fun. Of course, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to visit gaminggang.com for all latest in tabletop gaming news, reviews, and a whole lot more you are not going to find here on YouTube. You know the drill. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. And this is a live show. So that means there is chat available. It's not on screen. It's one of the ways I keep some of the more unusual commenters at bay. And of course, you must be a subscriber to the channel to take part in chat and be a subscriber for at least 10 minutes to take part in chat. A couple of ways that I keep the more unusual commenters at bay. But if you check both those boxes and you want to say howdy, maybe get a question, a comment, by all means, chime in. I will be more than happy to do my best to reply. First out the gate tonight is good friend of the show and chat moderator, the Madman. Mike is with us. AD is here, as is Chris Lundgren, 245 Trioxin, Semper Buffo, another of our chat moderators, Flaming Huron, is hanging with the gang. And I do see Maddie C is just popping on in. And I will guess the lovely and talented Miss Sarah D is lurking in the shadows. She is another of our chat moderators. So we might have a trio of chat moderators hanging with us tonight. Very nice, very nice. So I should point out all through the month of September, the Dispatch is being sponsored by Roll for Combat. That's right. And their Battle Zoo Bestiary Elemental Storm Kickstarter. Deliver a fresh and exciting experience and keep players guessing with over 170 new elemental monsters that channel the power of 20 unique elements, including Earth, Wind, and Fire. And water, as well as new elements like music, space, and time. A little timey-wimey there. Your players will never know what's coming. And these are award-winning monsters. But what does award-winning monsters actually mean? Each monster found within all of the Battle Zoo bestiaries, including this one, was submitted to an open contest for new and aspiring monster designers. Entries were judged in 2 rounds. First, all entries went through an open judging process where anyone could rank each monster based on a number of criteria. After that round was completed, the top monsters were selected, and then industry professionals scored the top entries on new criteria, producing copper, silver, gold, and platinum winners, as well as one grand prize winner, which was depicted on the cover. Not only did each winner get their monster depicted in this book, but each was also awarded a cash prize. Inside the book itself, next to each monster, you'll see each winner's name and medal rank. So, yes, each monster in these Battlezoo Bestiaries is actually award winning. The Battlezoo Bestiary Elemental Storm Kickstarter is, I don't know, like 1,400% funded at this point. It funded in the first about 10 minutes that it rocked on out. Now, the book is available in 2 flavors. You can get 5e Dungeons & Dragons or Pathfinder 2nd Edition, and you can reserve a copy of the hardcover of your choice for a $60 pledge. Now, if you just want to score the PDF, you can do that also. That's a $30 pledge through October 8th. Expected delivery is next spring. Very cool, very cool. Of course, if you've seen any of the Roll for Combat releases, one thing they always have is just absolutely spectacular production quality. So the production standards are top-notch, really, really well done. Nice, thick paper. The colors really pop, just jump off the page because it's a little more expensive paper that Steven and the gang over at Roll for Combat happen to be using. Yes. Battlezoo Bestiary Elemental Storm. You can't look inside it though. Can't look inside. Nope. Not at all. Can't look inside it. Nope. Sweet. Anyway, yeah, like I said, I think this Kickstarter is, last I looked, and I did not look today, it was, I think it was like 1,400% funded. So, yes, rocking and rolling. We've got some more people popping on into chat. We have got Sarah D says she is lurking as charged. Chris Lundgren says, Buddy, his cockatiel, is hanging with us watching the show. Hello, Buddy. Cleveland RX, Melwinius from York, and we love tabletop role-playing games, don't we all, is with us. Also, I do see W Forge has popped on in. There's Steven from Roll for Combat joining us. And we've also got Kathy Evans and Jody Connor. Nice chat, rocking and rolling tonight. Rocking and rolling. 245 Trioxin says, do it again. It was too fast to screenshot. Weirdly enough, I've talked about this before. The role-playing game pirates out there will legitimately sit there and screenshot a page through if every page is viewed in the video. No joke. I happened to do a first look for, I want to say it was Rime of the Frost Maiden for 5e D&D. Wasn't thinking. I think I was the first video out for that. And I was just doing the page through, talking, doing my usual shtick, which isn't a shtick. And I think it was like, for one, it was like, wow, this is really pulling in a lot of views. I mean, D&D stuff always would, prior to, the open game license fiasco. And then all of a sudden, I heard through the grapevine that there was a pirate copy of the book floating around out there, and it was from screenshots from a video. And I was like, sure enough, yes, it was mine. It was my video. I was like, shit. Never did that again. It was the first time I ever actually did that too. I had never done like just a full page through. I think it was just because nothing was going on that day. I didn't have a show. So I was like, oh, yeah, we'll just flip on through and spend time talking about what we see. My good friend from high school, Scott Weigel, is joining us tonight. Very cool. Welcome aboard. I think I've said hello to everyone in chat. Hope you brought enough for everyone. I didn't know there'd be so many. And Peaceful Porcupine is popping on in. Looking for ideas on how to make the Old West genre of role-playing games less yikes for them because they are Native American. That is something we're going to talk about. We are going to mention that because that is a major decision that a game master has to make. So we'll get to that, of course. We're going to tackle the tabletop gaming news first, and let's jump right on in because one of my favorite war games from Flying Pig Games and my good friend Mark H. Walker is up on Kickstarter for a new edition, and I've got the latest on 65 squad-level combat in the jungles of Vietnam. Fast, furious, and fun. I don't know. Just calling a war game fun like that just sounds kind of odd. But yeah. A squad-level tactical game, 65 recounts the early battles of the Vietnam War, from Ia Drang to Operation Starlight, and most everything between. The large and beautiful counters, 1 inch to 1 inch and 37 tenths of an inch, or no, hundredths of an inch. Like an inch and a quarter, basically, inch and a half, somewhere around there. They are big, chunky counters. If you've seen me cover any of the like big scale Flying Pig Games releases, you know those counters are nice and chunky. Really works nicely for the old eyes. And I mean old eyes. Anyway, these counters will represent squads, leaders, heroes, snipers, M48 and PT-76 tanks, and more. As these units' commander, you will move and fight over 3 geomorphic game boards as you try to best your opponent in one of 8 nail-biting historical scenarios. The game is card-driven, using a system similar to Flying Pig's Night of Man and 85 Afghanistan Graveyard of Empires, which I just shared an unboxing of last Wednesday. And you will actually see the expansion unboxed tomorrow. We actually have a couple of videos popping tomorrow. I'm spoiling you kids. I really am. Anyway, this adds a sense of delicious uncertainty to play, that card-driven system. Can I advance my sappers? Does the enemy have a fire card he's just waiting to play? Furthermore, the cards simplify the game, containing much of the data needed to play. You don't spend the afternoon with your head in a rule book when you play 65. This is a game created by gamers for gamers to play. Flying Pig Games believe 65 is a unique game. The art is immersive. Certainly that isn't unique today, but they feel 65 is one heck of a good-looking game. I'd agree with that. The card mechanic is also unique, adding a subtle layer of strategy to the tactical decisions gamers face in any squad-level game. Flying Pig Games loves the power system. Action cards that state power can be used to activate special capabilities on many units. These are used to provide smoke laying, portray a squad with 40mm grenades, or the NVA's ability to ambush their enemy. Additionally, the simple anti-armor mechanic is different for this type of game. Count the distance in hexes, adjust for the firing weapon's accuracy modifier, and draw a card. If the 2-hit number is greater than the range, you hit. No fuss, little muss. And these mechanics make 65 a title that wargamers will want in their collections. There is a short Kickstarter video. Let's take a peek.
Playmay and the weeks that followed have emphasized one single point about our commitment in Vietnam that will be re-emphasized in weeks, months, and perhaps years to come. That we are at war not only with the Viet Cong of South Vietnam, but with North Vietnam and its strong and dedicated army.
About 2 minutes remaining, over.
The enemy in Vietnam is all too often invisible.
We're forward ready, all rounds on the ground in 30 seconds, over. Turn, hit the slide, left turn. 643, kick 17, over.
This is the end. Dun, dun, dun. This is the end, my friend. Yeah, okay. I should point out 65 is for 2 or 3 players. Strangely, I don't remember it being for 3 players with the first edition. It's for ages 12 and up, plays in around 45 to 180 minutes. It's going to depend on the scenario you choose to play. This project over on Kickstarter is past the 300% funding mark. You can reserve a copy of 65 Squad Level Combat in the Jungles of Vietnam, 2nd edition, for a $90 pledge through October 3rd. Expected delivery is next April. So there are some questions popping up about this game in chat, as well as the Native American experience through role-playing games. So Peaceful Porcupine is pointing out there was some mention of, I always forget the name of it. Coyote and crow. I always remember the crow part. I always forget the coyote part, which I have always heard good things about. I have never had an opportunity to take a peek at. Peaceful Porcupine is basically saying that the tribe they're a member of is sort of in a forbidden land or an ice wall, something like that. And because my understanding is that is a role-playing game where the Europeans never stepped foot on the American continent, or they did, and they just did not get a foothold, I guess. Like I said, I'm not overly familiar with the role-playing game. I've heard good things about it, like I said. But someone had mentioned, hey, just homebrew your tribe into it. And Peaceful Porcupine said, there is a non-standard homebrew that does, but the CNC regulars hate it because it's non-standard. If I may give a piece of advice, never give a shit what people playing a role-playing game think about the role-playing game that you are running or playing. So if you are going to homebrew any role-playing game, never give one iota of a shit about what other people think. Because if you do, it'll never end. Just a little piece of my advice. Anyway, back to this game. There is some questions about the game itself. I think Chris Lundgren just had asked, how complex is this? The first edition, I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, I would give it like a 4, maybe a 5. It's not overly complex. It is different. The card aspect of it is a little different. If you are familiar with Combat Commander from GMT Games, then you won't mind the cards. even though it's a completely different system. That also has kind of, there are no dice. The dice rolls are all on the cards for Combat Commander. That's not the case here, but you do have, as mentioned in the sell sheet info, you do have the armor to hit and penetration on the cards. So that's it as well. So I liked 65. Pretty good. Pretty good game. I will say a little pricey. I mean, it's a big box, though. It is a big box. The component quality is really good. So there is that. And it's designed by my friend Mark H. Walker. So, it's going to be pretty good. Let's talk about some role-playing game news, because I'm going to save you a little bit of money with a couple of bundles tonight. There's a new Humble Bundle, which is launched, and it's a deal which features the Warhammer 40K role-playing games Death Watch and Rogue Trader, which both of these are now available through Cubicle 7 Games, not Fantasy Flight Games or Edge Studio, actually. Anyway, I've got the skinny on the savings. An epic Warhammer 40K role-playing duo. From our friends at Cubicle 7 Games, play your own role in the Warhammer 40K universe with two unique approaches to tabletop role-playing games. In the Death Watch line, you'll be placed on the front lines of the Imperium's battle to spread humanity's influence across the galaxy. In Rogue Trader, you'll be thrust into the unknown regions of space, searching for profit and plunder. Get core rulebooks for both experiences, along with dozens of expansions, campaigns, and resource kits, and help support Children's Health Ireland. You can jump aboard for a minimum donation of $1. $1. That's right. A single solitary dollar. I'd buy that for $1. Or go all in and score all 40. Yes, you heard that correct. 40 PDFs for a minimum donation of $25 through October 12th. And of course, once again, don't forget, your donation will benefit Children's Health Ireland. And I will say, I do not know anything about either of these role-playing games. Now, I will say, which has absolutely nothing to do with Rogue Trader, the tabletop role-playing game, I did start playing the Owlcat Rogue Trader and was enjoying it. And then I was like, I've hit a part that needs to, it's not completely done yet. So I kind of put it on the shelf for a while. I think I'll probably go back to it in about a year. Because I think at that point in time, because I had been hearing that the third act kind of falls apart and that Owlcat was working on kind of redoing it, or at least finishing it, I guess. So I did dig that. Thought that was pretty cool because you're playing as a rogue trader in their group. So I like that quite a lot. I know these were very popular. Obviously enough, there was tons of support for these two because there are 40 PDFs and they are all either Death Watch or Rogue Trader. I think there were more releases for Rogue Trader than there were for Death Watch. But hell, you jump on board. I think the minimum donation to get the core rule books is, I think it's 5 or 10. So keep that in mind. But pretty nice. Pretty nice. All right, let's talk about another Kickstarter, this time from our friends over at Kobold Press, because they've launched a Kickstarter for a couple of new releases for Tales of the Valiant and 5e Dungeons & Dragons. Here's the scoop on The Labyrinth. The Labyrinth World Book provides something new in 5e tabletop, a campaign overlay. It is a means to connect together as many existing campaign settings as you desire by adding the Labyrinth as a connecting layer and source of adventure. Tired of the realms, but what might want to return? Take the long way through the Labyrinth to another world and go back home anytime. Want to visit the hells, but don't want to torch your whole campaign? It's covered. Ready to invade a god's dream and make it real? Sure, there's a faction devoted to that. Ready to visit the near void to kick horrific world-eating monsters to the curb? Well, they're waiting for you, so you can let me know how that turns out. Want to drink from the wells of creation and make a world of your own? Okay, that might take some doing. The Labyrinth lifts your homebrew campaign from amazing to mind-bending. The Labyrinth World Book hardcover describes the setting and player options with 6 new lineages and heritages, including Star Elves, Minotaurs, Gearforged, and 3 new Dragonborn, including Radiant and Void variants. There's also more than 70 new spells for Portal, Dream, and Void magic, along with dozens of new vehicles and magical items. The 15 new subclasses include a Spirit Path Barbarian, Shock Trooper Fighter, Radiant Warlock, and many more. From the Secrets of the Void to the Worlds and Factions, it's all ready to play. The Labyrinth Adventures hardcover delivers a complete campaign of 10 adventures from levels 1 through 8, with a linked plot line for running them in sequence. Of course, you can also run any adventure independently if you just want to dip in for a level or 2. Now, there is a Kickstarter video. I have stripped the music out of this, so I do apologize if the voiceover artist's voice sounds a little odd. But I did want to share the video, and of course, I was getting a copyright flag for the music, so it is stripped out. But hey, let's give it a peek. It's pretty short.
Welcome to the Labyrinth, the place between worlds where creation and corruption collide in a cosmic saga of epic proportions. Explore the cosmic background of arcane secrets, confront cataclysmic monsters in the near or deep void, and create entire worlds on a whim. With 14 new lineages, 6 new heritages, 30 new monsters, almost 100 new spells, and 14 mind-bending subclasses, players have an abundance of choices for multiversal characters and storytelling, all completely compatible with the Tales of the Valiant RPG and Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Run your most epic campaign ever with the Labyrinth Adventure Book, containing 11 new adventures from levels 1 to 8, either as a continuous storyline, or take only what you need to weave directly into your own campaign. Backers in the first 48 hours will receive a Kickstarter exclusive Black Styx coin, the only payment accepted by the ferryman for traversing between worlds. Claim your key to the Labyrinth and embark on a journey through 10,000 worlds. Back on Kickstarter now.
The Kickstarter project for Labyrinth funded within moments. You can reserve a copy of the World Book hardcover with PDF for a pledge of $59, or grab the Adventure hardcover with PDF for $49, or score both with their PDFs for a pledge of $109. Now, this project is going to run through October 22nd. Expected delivery is June of next year. Gleeman RX says, the voiceover sounds a bit sensual. Well, I had nothing to do with that. To be honest, I thought the voiceover sounded fine. It didn't seem like it changed much, stripping the music out. So, there we go. Dice Tales is with us in chat. Welcome aboard. I think I've said hello to everyone who's hanging out in chat, except for Ross Zimmerman. I do see. I believe this might be a first-time visit in chat for Ross. Welcome aboard. They mentioned they're looking forward to that new Western role-playing game, Tales of the Old West, which uses the Year Zero engine, which I shared a news piece last Thursday about, which actually kind of led us into tonight's topic, to be honest, is what kind of got me thinking about that. W. Forge says it's Wolfgang Bauer's real voice. No, it's not. Ross says it's a third or fourth chat. Sorry. And I'm actually terrible with names. So just imagine how bad I am with names in chat. Who's this person, the madman? I don't understand. Is this the first time the madman's been with us? I think it might be. You want to save some more money? Because there is a Holmesian bundle of holding. It is returned by way of Fearlight Games. And I've got the deets on Baker Street. Detective. We've resurrected our January 2022 Baker Street bundle featuring the entire line of the Victorian investigative tabletop role-playing game, Baker Street, role-playing in the world of Sherlock Holmes from Fearlight Games. Sherlock Holmes is missing and presumed dead. In the great detective's absence, the stoic Dr. Watson asks you and your fellow intrepid investigators to solve the most baffling crimes in history. The wide-ranging investigations in these casebooks sends you to rescue the Queen, face the Hound of the Baskervilles, solve the Jack Ripper murders, and foil many other nefarious plans of crafty villains. Victorian streets, foggy nights, and crime most foul await. For just $19.95, you'll get all 5 titles in this revived offers Detection Collection, which has a retail value of $80, as DRM-free PDFs, including the complete Baker Street role-playing in the world of Sherlock Holmes core rulebook, Sherlock by Gaslight, a complete campaign about the Whitechapel murders, and 3 case books that together present 19 complete investigations. Baker Street Casebook 1, Casebook 2, which is Missions from Mycroft, and Casebook number 3, Strange Cases and Distant Places. These savings will run through October 2nd. I recall reviewing Baker Street way back in the day. It was pretty good. It was actually pretty good. And this was a role-playing game. I shouldn't say was. I mean, it's still available in PDF. The Fearlight Games website is still around, but I don't think that they've actually published anything for the game since like 2017, 2018, somewhere around, I should say, that point in time. So I don't foresee anything else coming for this game. But it was actually approved by the estate, of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, which is not usually the case with something that would be essentially public domain. So I thought that was kind of cool. I thought that was pretty good. It is interesting, and the premise is, Holmes is dead. It's like that period of time between him taking the fall from the falls. So yes, so kind of cool. Interestingly enough, one thing that I always thought was kind of odd, or just unusual, I guess I'll say, not necessarily odd, is just how much play Professor Moriarty has gotten over the years, and he appears in all of one story by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. One. Kind of wild. All right, let's move on to our final news piece, because now available in print for Dungeon Crawl Classics and Old School Essentials is Intermediary Mund. And here's the lowdown from Exalted Funeral. In the cavern was a bridge made of pink crystal. The bridge crossed an underground lake to an island far in the distance. The island was like a camel's hump. The island was covered in grass. Grass glowed like an emerald. On the top of the island was a crowd of riders in black armor. In the center of the crowd was a rider in black armor, twice the size of a man. The tall rider in black armor held a warhammer above his head. Over his shoulder was a sphere. The sphere hovered in the air. The sphere was made of interlocking pieces of stone. The pieces were strange shapes and constant motion. The sphere remained a sphere. Black light poured out from the center of the sphere between the stone pieces. The group walked across the bridge to the island. Intermediary Mund is a transmission. Intermediary Mund convenes the stories. The stories tell of the doomed and sufferers upon the great anvil. Come and learn of Ulflothgar. Know of Herschel and Thunderegg. Read of brave Durfnall and devastating Selek-Dur. Intermediary Mund is the nexus point. Intermediary Mund is the singular note mind colliding bursting with the dimensions of infinity. Intermediary Mund is an illustrated collection of stories recounting the adventure campaigns running dungeon crawl classics. It provides statistics for monsters, NPCs, and magical items in both DCC and OSC formats. It's equal parts art book, illustrated campaign journal, and GM resource. The 64-page softcover with PDF is available over at Exalted Funeral for an MSRP of $20. You can grab just the PDF for $12. And we shall be taking a look at this in the very near future because this is part of the shipment that Exalted Funeral is sending along. In fact, if you were not watching last week, the fine folks from Exalted Funeral reached out and asked if I would be interested in covering their games, which was interesting because I had reached out to them about a year ago and hadn't heard anything back. But this was a different contact who touched base with me. And they're sending a box just loaded with goodies. And this is one of them. This is one of them that we'll be taking a look at. So it looks kind of weird, especially with the character with crucifixes sticking out of their shoulders. Kind of bizarre. It is from a comic book creator. If I remember correctly, I think their name is Benjamin Marra, something along those lines. Yes. So kind of cool. Might be kind of cool. Might be art punk crap. I don't know. We're going to find out, though. We shall find out. Very cool. Bradley Thorpe has joined us, as has Beat Cafe in chat. Bradley Thorpe says, Romance of the Perilous Lands is their favorite tabletop role-playing game this year. Really? Is it a new edition or something? Because I reviewed Romance of the Perilous Land when it first came out from Osprey Games. And it was kind of just a 5e rehash, really. I don't know. Peaceful Porcupine says an ad came up and they got blasted. My volume is on the low side. My volume is set to the level that YouTube allows. No higher, no lower. So if there is an issue with your volume, that's your problem. Well, I mention that because a lot of people, if you're watching on a laptop and you're not wearing like headphones or earbuds or anything like that, and it's laptops. I'm not saying phones, tablets, stuff like that. If you're watching on a laptop manufacturers include the cheapest, shittiest speakers you could possibly get. That's why now I have a Lenovo now, which, okay, so the speakers are actually pretty good. But pretty much every laptop that I had in the 7 years prior, I would actually have to download a program to boost the volume of the speakers because it was like, Like, yeah, I'm listening to music. Yeah, we're singing. I'm singing. It'd be like, what the hell? Bradley asked if I've reviewed Zweihander Flames of Freedom. No, I have not. I gotta be honest, I'm not. Okay, so I don't really have anything personally against Zweihander or its creator. Isn't it Daniel Fox? I want to say is the creator. I have nothing against them. My issue is that, and I kind of have a problem with this. When you see role-playing games come out, which are basically another game from the past with what I like to refer to as the serial numbers, scraped off. So like Zweihander is Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. No getting around it. Against the Dark Master, that's another game. It's essentially Middle-earth role-playing. But, there's usually there's no credit given or anything like that. So a lot of people who aren't familiar with the original game think, oh, hey, this is something new. It's like, no, it's really not. I shared the first look at the Zweihander. I think that's how it's pronounced. Zweihander. It's a hand and a half sword. It's large. It's a little larger than a bastard sword, though. I couldn't imagine anybody swinging one of those with one hand. Certainly not me. Although I probably couldn't swing a broadsword with two hands. I reviewed the starter set. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I take that back. I did a first look at the starter set, and I was actually impressed. I was impressed by what was in there. And it was one of those starter sets that really had a good amount of content in it, which is always a good thing in my book. And then soon after I got that starter set, I'm trying to remember the publisher. The publisher was trying to make inroads into role-playing games because they're a book publisher. And they've got kind of an odd name. McMeal? Something like that. It's McMeal. And they announced, well, they were no longer going to produce any role-playing game stuff, that they were dropping the line. So it was kind of like, okay. So they're not going to be selling this anymore, so why should I review it? Bradley points out there's a line of role-playing game books called Mithras. Yeah, that is essentially, to my knowledge, Mithras is RuneQuest without Glorantha. Bradley says, I actually got them into Jackals. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. Hey, since we're talking about this, you may have noticed earlier today, I shared my first look at Through the Hedgerow from Osprey Games. This is a new role-playing game from Osprey Games. I actually do a relatively detailed first look because mechanically, this is different. And the video is probably about 25 minutes long, just so you know. And one thing I mentioned is that Osprey Games kind of has this thing where they'll release a role-playing game and then there's no support for it. They never release anything for it ever again. Jackals is one of the exceptions to that. I think if I remember right, there's 2 role-playing games that they've actually released more than one book for. Jackals is one of them. I think it's Heirs to Heresy. I don't think it's The Heresy. I think it's Heirs to Heresy is that. The other one that got another book. So somebody had commented on the video that the author says that they've got a bestiary and some other books in the works, which is cool. But that doesn't necessarily mean that Osprey Games is going to publish them, because I have heard that before about other games. Dark City was one that I liked. I thought that was a pretty good role-playing game. Dark City was one that I had heard, oh, well, you know, there's going to be a case book and like a setting book. And it was like nothing. Nothing at all. Zip, zero, zilch. Russ Zimmerman says Mithras is RuneQuest 6. Yeah, I knew it was built on RuneQuest. So, yeah, that's another. Once again, I don't know if the folks who sell Mithras give any credit as far as where the mechanics come from and stuff. I don't know. I have no idea. Chris Lundgren asks, is Dark City based on the movie? No, it is not. It is a 1940s, 50s noir mystery role-playing game. So thought it was pretty good. Thought it was pretty cool. Well, I guess maybe I wouldn't even say mystery. Sort of crime noir, maybe is a good way to point it out. All right, Matthew Blackwell is popping on into chat. So tonight we are going to talk about bringing the Old West to life in role-playing games. And we're going to talk about some options out there. We're going to talk about some tropes. We're going to talk about some sticky situations that you might be a little concerned with. I know we do have some folks in chat who don't have a good comfort level with role-playing games that are based in the old American West. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, because I have to say that it is an underrepresented genre for as popular as that genre has been over the years in other media. I know I'm sounding intelligent tonight for some reason. Hey, I've been working on my vocabulary. Dicel says, Osprey's Jackals is a good game. It is. I liked it. I gave it a good score. Flaming Heron says, can't ignore that they happen, Jeff, but no one says you need to make them the focus of your game. Yeah, we're going to talk about that. We will be discussing that. Although Flaming Heron's from Australia. Flaming Heron doesn't get the vote on. No, I'm teasing. Actually, the outback of Australia in some ways is relatively similar terrain-wise to our West here in America, at least as far as I understand. At least that's what Quigley told me when he came back from visiting. All right, so we're going to talk about bringing the Old West to life at your game table. But first, I think it's time for me to tell you about Drive-Thru RPG, because I skipped over that. You thought I was going to the brief intermission. No. I have not talked about Drive-Thru RPG tonight, but keep in mind, the Gaming Gang, thus the Dispatch, is affiliated with the One Bookshelf sites. So if you are going to go visit Drive-Thru RPG, Storyteller's Vault, Dungeon Masters Guild, Wargame Vault, what have you, please stop by thegaminggang.com first. Click on one of our banner ads. That way, if you happen to make a purchase, I get a small portion of that sale. And all those nickels, dimes, and quarters really do go a long way to keeping thegaminggang.com around. Also, if you like the video, if you dig the channel, if you find thegaminggang.com to be a valuable resource, hell, if you just like what we do, you can always stop on by paypal.me/thegaminggang to make a small donation. Hell, you can buy me a 2-liter bottle of soda. My cup's empty. I'll refill it during the brief intermission. But what am I supposed to do? Like the fake, like film sip? And there are some of you out there who pop on by paypal.me/thegaminggang and make not small donations. Big thank you to folks like the Madman and Agile Monk, Kevin King, and Joshua Edwards, just to name a few. Yes, but thanks to anyone out there who utilizes those banner ads and or visits paypal.me, the gaming gang. All right, let's jump on into that brief intermission so then we can get on with our topic.
Got your parachute?
I forgot it.
How about the Wilkins coffee?
I forgot that too.
You'll never forget this.
What lovely music for a murder, or 2, or 3, or 9. Who's this? Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to meet a dear friend. 9 killed you. 9 shall die.
Your wife, no, 5s. But you I will kill.
But you can't, Doctor. I am already dead.
Here, how are we going to get him off this? You take his head, and I'll take his feet. Let's unscrew him.
Dr. Vibes, who samples the finer things of life. In his own inimitable way, and experiments with fascinating instruments of death.
The what, sir? The guitar. The 10 curses visited upon the pharaohs before Exodus.
9 shall die. 9 eternities in doom.
The curse of boils, of bats.
Frogs?
Frogs, yes. And the curse of blood. Curse of hail in the bloody middle of nowhere.
Are you ready for Dr. Five?
Probably the most terrifying motion picture you'll ever see.
And now, on with the show.
Ah, yes, a Vincent Price classic. I was going to say, I seem to remember watching that for the first time on Channel 7 ABC in Chicago. It was one of those afternoon movies that Channel 7 would do. The local affiliate would do like a week or two of maybe Godzilla movies or horror movies. And then it was always like, oh, got to watch that after school. All right, because it was like grammar school years. But most of the time I was like, nah, it's... you know, movies that as a kid, I'd be like, I don't care about that. Blah, who cares? But I do remember Dr. Phibes. In fact, isn't the first book, or not first book, the first movie, isn't it the title, at least maybe in the United States, was The Abominable Dr. Phibes? Or is that the sequel? I don't remember. I do not recall. Very cool. Very cool. I know I should have probably waited till October to roll that on out, but hey, there's plenty of horror movies and science fiction movies we could be sharing trailers for that, fingers crossed, do not set off the copyrights. Actually, I know it won't because I already double checked. So that is cool. Although every once in a while, like 48 hours later, it'll be like, oh, wait, copyright infringement. I'm like, wait a second. You didn't tell me that before. There's some discussion about a lot of advertisements popping up during the stream. I have no control over when those happen. I could, if I wanted, set it up where I could like do ad runs when I select them. I don't want to have to hassle with that. And I actually have the settings for the advertisements to be relatively low. So I can only imagine what it would be if I had it at high. What, every 3 minutes? Well, Jeff's done with that sentence. Let's run another ad. So tonight, we are going to talk about bringing the old American West to life at your game table in role-playing games. So the first thing you want to take a look at is, what kind of system do you want to run? So Gloomwin RX says, yes, the original 1971 movie is The Abominable Dr. Phibes. And then the sequel is Dr. Phibes Rises Again. I don't seem to, it's been so long since I saw those movies. I probably have not seen the original in 35 years. And I think I saw the sequel once, and I don't recall the sequel being very good. Yeah, because at least the original, there's some parts where you're kind of like, kind of dark humor, kind of black humor. And I seem to recall the sequel was just kind of dumb. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Like I said, it's been a long, long time. All right. Anyway. So first thing you'd want to look at is what is the system you want to use? And I know there are quite a few role-playing games out there that have a Weird West motif to them. So, of course, we have Down Darker Trails, which is a supplement for Call of Cthulhu. We've got Haunted West by Chris Spivey, which is really well done, which you could easily use that without the paranormal, supernatural, alien influences quite easily. There's also Weird Frontiers, which I have not personally taken a look at, that is built on the Dungeon Crawl Classics mechanics, I believe, which, once again, that's kind of a Weird West. So the more popular of the Western motif role-playing games out there are Weird West. So if you have one of those, or more than one, you could easily tweak it to just make it a Western role-playing game. Now, as far as Western role-playing games, and what kind of got me thinking about this topic was last Thursday, sharing the news about that Kickstarter from the folks in England. So people are like, wait a second, they're English. How are they doing a Western role-playing game? Tales of the Old West, which is actually doing pretty well over on Kickstarter. I think this is its last week, which kind of got me thinking about this topic. Of course, there's the classic Boot Hill. You can grab that in PDF, probably relatively cheap, over at either Drive-Thru RPG or Dungeon Masters Guild. I would think it's probably Drive-Thru RPG. And that went through, if I remember correctly, 3 editions. I have never seen the 3rd edition, but I think the 3rd edition is quite fleshed out. So we've got that. I was going to say we got Deadlands. Once again, Weird West. But Savage Worlds, you could adapt Savage Worlds for the West relatively easily just by having the core rule book. And of course, I know that the madman would say, oh, yeah, sure. Scott, my friend Scott says, or you can want his copy of Boot Hill that's still in the box. I know Scott's got like all this stuff from when we were in high school. It's pretty wild. In fact, I don't know if Scott still has it or not, but I remember sharing some pictures in an article over on thegaminggang.com. Some pictures of the hand-typed Fletcher Pratt's naval war game ships that we would calculate, type them up. So, Flaming Aaron's question, Haunted West? Yeah. Isn't that what Chris Spivey's game is called? Haunted West, right? I don't think I screwed that up. I reviewed it. I liked it. It was good. And it is very respectful to the real history as far as the West, which we're going to get into in a bit. Ross Zimmerman says Sidewinder Recoiled for Savage Worlds was earlier this year. I do know that the latest Kickstarter for Savage Worlds, which is supposed to be for Deadlands, the North, they delayed it. It's not going to launch until next week. So, Flaming Aaron said, oh, they didn't hear me mention Haunted West. Their video was buffering. Let's take a look, see if there's a problem here. Now, we're all good. That is YouTube's end, which we've been seeing. Scott says, yes, they still have all that in the ships they made. I actually made some ships when I taught my nephew and his friends Fletcher Pratt's about 2-3 years ago. I'll have to show them on camera. I mean, they're just flat. I mean, there's nothing. W. Ford says Sidewinder Recoiled was originally a D20 version of a Western role-playing game. So there's aces and eights. I know that. I don't know how well supported it is. I know there have been some supplements for that. Is aces and eights the game where you roll the dice in the box top that's actually a target of a person? Because I know there's a Western game that has that. For some reason, I wanted to say it was aces and eights. I know we do have Chris Lundgren, I believe, was talking about Cowpuncher as far as another relatively modern Western role-playing game. So, funny enough, Scott's with us. Scott will probably remember this. When we played we went to a game day, which was sponsored by the Squadron Shop. I think it was the summer between freshman and sophomore year. And this gentleman ran a game of Boot Hill, and it was a cattle drive. And the game was sort of based on the movie Chisholm with John Wayne. I wonder if Scott remembers that. That was actually a really good game. And the gentleman had told us, he was an older guy. He was probably older than I am now. And he had mentioned that he had tried to talk to TSR about purchasing he had all these optional rules that he'd come up with and tables and all this other stuff. And he pitched it to TSR and they were like, no thanks. We had a good time. It was a good game. It was a nice game. Tony Urquides says they've been soloing Frontier Scum. Pretty fun. Is Frontier Scum, Now I've heard of it. I've shared news about it. I'm trying to remember, is Frontier Scum straight Western or is Frontier Scum like Weird West? Because for some strange reason, I think it is straight Western. I think. Once again, I haven't had an opportunity to take a peek. Steve Cavadas is with us. I believe this might be a first-time visit in chat for Steve. Welcome aboard. Says, Mark Hunt has Tall Tales BX, much like his Gangbusters game. Yeah, I've heard good things about his Gangbusters. W4 says, let's not forget GURPS, Old West. Oh, yes, let's. Doesn't matter. I mean, the reality is, it's not going to truly matter what Western role-playing game you utilize. What you really need to do is you need to decide what sort of Western game you are going to run and that your players will enjoy. So one of the first things that you have to keep in mind is that most Western role-playing games do not simulate the West as it was, and in a variety of different ways. What most Western role-playing games simulate is the big screen Westerns of the 50s and 60s into the early 70s. So where they start to kind of change from the films is when we get into kind of the spaghetti Westerns. Because they're really, to my knowledge, I don't know of any Western role-playing games out there that look to portray the spaghetti Western. So, Tony Ortiz says it has some weird in there as far as Frontier Scum, if you want, but it's pretty flexible. It can just be gritty Western if you want. So kind of like Haunted West. Because I know Chris Spivey wanted to make sure that you could run Haunted West as just a Western role-playing game. Anywho. So yes, Flaming Heron points out it's more about the game you play, less about the system. So one thing you want to avoid, so let's discuss this. So in my opinion, the first thing that you're going to need to decide is, do you want to run a role-playing game that's more realistic and more like modern era Westerns or 21st century Westerns? And what I mean by that is, now I just watched The Thicket, which I thought was pretty good. I thought it was pretty good. It's based on a novel by Joe Lansdale, who mainly wrote horror. But I think now Joe Lansdale kind of writes crime stuff. But yeah, that was Peter Dinklage is in it. And yeah, I liked it. I thought it was pretty good. Although it takes place probably around 1912-ish. So, another Western movie that I would recommend if you have not seen it, Open Range. I really like it. Once again, it's more true to life. And the gun battle at the end of the film, pretty realistic. So I that's another one. Funny enough, I just recently started rewatching Lonesome Dove. I've probably watched that over the years. I've probably seen that 10, 12 times, and it still holds up. And it is still realistic. It is not, it does not romanticize the West in any way, shape, or form. So as far as the sort of game that you want to run You have to decide, are you going to romanticize the West, or are you going to kind of try to be a little more historical? So you also have to keep in mind, what is going to be the treatment of non-whites in your game? Because you don't want to pretend they don't exist. You don't want to pretend that there are no Native Americans. You don't want to pretend that there are no freed slaves or free men there. And of course, after the Civil War, which is normally the period that you're going to see Western games set in, it's usually 1870s, 1880s, it's sort of right there in the, I guess I'd say the sweet spot of Westerns. W. Ford says, I like fun Western films like Silverado or The Quick and the Dead. Yeah, I watched, actually, funny enough, I just watched Silverado about 2 months ago. It still holds up relatively well. You know what's actually really good is the 320 to Yuma, the remake that they did. That's actually really well done. Anyway, so we're going to ignore kind of the romanticized West, because that's not how I would run a Western role-playing game. So I can't really talk about, oh, well, this is how I wouldn't run it, right? Because I don't know. It's not something that I would really think about. But you have to keep in mind, the West was filled with unreconstructed Confederates. That is a fact. That's why there were times where we were nearly on the brink of another civil war because of things that were going on out in the West. So some of the kind of tropes that you want to utilize in a realistic Western role-playing game is the fact that there are wide open spaces. There is no one to rely on but yourself and the people who you are with. Especially if you've ever driven across the West. When I delivered RVs all around the country, I was back and forth all over the West. And one thing that always struck me is, even today, how you get into states like Montana and Wyoming and the Dakotas, and you will just go huge lengths across the state, and there's nothing. Even now. So just imagine someone who is, going west, young man. I mean, they could only rely upon themselves, and maybe if they had a guide who was leading a wagon train or something like that, you better keep your fingers crossed that guide knew what the hell they were talking about, because otherwise you'd end up like the Donners and the Donner Party. So, vast empty spaces is a meme that you want to utilize in a Western role-playing game. It's a Cruel World is another aspect of Westerns that you want to utilize if you're looking to run a realistic game. Because a great example, watch Lonesome Dove again if you haven't had an opportunity, and just how many of the characters die from a wide range of things, from being bit by multiple water moccasins to being strung up for robbing a bank and killing somebody, to dying from an infection from an arrow wound. So yes, death is a constant thing, as Fleming Huron points out. It has to be a constant threat. And people could stick their finger on a mesquite plant and get a mesquite thorn, and that was poison. If they didn't take care of it, they could die from it. I mean, just crazy stuff. People would fall off a wagon and have the wagon roll over them and break their necks. I mean, so yes. So death has to be a constant threat. And you can kind of approach it like I've talked about running Call of Cthulhu, where, you should always have, that terror. Well, not always, and never be afraid to off a character, but try to make it the NPC, because then you could still drive home the point and your players still have a character, So a great way to approach a Western role-playing game would be for you to have plenty of NPCs, like people in town and other homesteaders and things like that. And just like here and there, whoop, there goes one, there goes another. So that's something to keep in mind. Something else is life was cheap for many people in the West. That's why it's really pretty amazing to see how quickly the West became civilized in most respects, because of how many small little towns there would be that didn't have a sheriff or didn't have any sort of law enforcement, and how many communities or settlements were settled by people who did not want any sort of law enforcement. Something we talked about on Thursday's show when we were talking about that Kickstarter is how gray everything was as far as people's morals, and how easily people's morals could change, because it's all about survival. The West is a harsh place, and you got to be able to adapt to whatever it throws at you in order to survive. So you would actually see lawmen become outlaws and then go back to being lawmen, or outlaws become lawmen and then go back to being outlaws. That's why, more modern scholarship on the West will talk about, people like Wyatt Earp or John Wesley Hardin. A man so mean he once shot, what was it? A man so mean he once shot a man in the back for snoring, or once shot a man for snoring. The old Time Life books, commercials. W. Ford says, realism in a role-playing game would mean any game that takes place between 1917 and 1920 would mean you'd probably die from the Spanish flu. Yeah, you'd have a really good chance. Most certainly. Most certainly. Let's see. So Kuchansky is with us in chat, as is Mateo. The railroad played a major part of change in those days. Yes, that's something else I was going to talk about. You want to make sure the railroad plays a role, because that is, the expansion going out west. You would see, and this actually would make a really good plot for a campaign. You would see small communities and the lengths that they would go to get the railroad to come through their settlement and not somewhere else. And you would see that there were towns that were flourishing towns, and the railways passing by. And remember, there were a lot of different railroad companies. It wasn't just, a handful. But if you would have flourishing communities where if the railroad went through another town and bypassed them, they dried up and became ghost towns. That's where most ghost towns come from, is from towns that began, to expand, and then the railroad didn't go through there, or towns that popped up because of silver mines, gold mines. That's copper in some respect, but copper wasn't a big driver of, people weren't like, oh, I'm going to go get rich on copper. Not like the gold rush, things like that. So something else that plays a role. But something else you want to keep in mind too is lethality of combat. So and once again, if you're looking at putting together a fairly realistic role-playing game for the West, wait a second. Let's see something here. So chat disconnected, but we're okay. For a second, I was like, oh, wait, did our internet drop or something? Because that's usually what happens when I see chat disconnect. But no, I guess it was just a chat thing. So yes, as Chris points out, boomtowns. There's boomtowns all over the West, and ghost towns all over the West. But lethality of combat. So if you were shot in an extremity, you would probably live. So if you were shot in the arm or a leg, probably, as long as you didn't have an artery hit or anything like that. If you were shot in the chest or the gut, not too good. And it wasn't necessarily the gunshot. It was infection. Infection would get you. So something else to keep in mind. So if you're looking at having a realistic Western, you can't have everybody shooting it out all the time, because once again, life is cheap, and death is everywhere. But you don't want it to be every time you turn around. You're rolling up new characters and that. So you have to come up with some plot lines, some plot points for your campaign or adventure to keep your players occupied that don't include just gunplay. So that's something too. W4 says, hey, I stepped on a rusty nail, dead from tetanus in 3 weeks. I don't know if it would take 3 weeks. I would think it'd be a little sooner than that. Adrian72 is with us in chat, says, as a Kansan, I'm tired of the Spanish getting credit for our flu. In case you don't know, and I'm sure Hadrian72 knows this, the reason why they called it the Spanish flu is because in the United States, we had a lot of censorship going on, government censorship of our newspapers. And the Spanish were the only country whose press was free enough to keep writing about the pandemic. And because there was so much coming out from Spain about the pandemic, people called it the Spanish flu, thinking that, oh, well, I keep reading everything about Spain. It must have originated in Spain. No, they think it originated here in the United States, as Hadrian72 says, in Kansas. In fact, I believe it was an army camp that they think it broke out in. Anyway, so talking about the Westerns as far as the approach to non-whites. So if you are going to do a realistic game, now I am not a person who's like, oh yeah, well, we're going to focus on racism, and lynchings and stuff like that. Absolutely not. I don't want that kind of shit. at my game table. It's historical. It's real. I don't want to game it. Now, those kind of things, I would most certainly have off screen to kind of show just how far we've come. And yes, I know in some ways we haven't come far enough, but we have come a long way in 150 years as far as our line of thinking about other people, people who are different than ourselves. But as far as like the Native Americans, you don't want to be sitting there using the old trope of, having the Indians as, your default villains, because that's certainly not going to be the case. I mean, the reality is if you're going to run a Western role-playing game, you should at least look into some of the history of the West and the treatment of the native peoples by the U.S. government and all the shenanigans and lies and, hey, let's, all right, we're going to sign this treaty and, okay, they're gone. All right, let's tear this treaty up. Sadly, our country has done some very despicable things. Does that have to be on screen in your game? No. But as I think it was Flaming Huron pointed this out a bit ago. So Carolyn is with us in chat, says, well, some of us have evolved. Not all of us. Yeah, okay, that's true. No Inquisitors with us too in chat. So as Flaming Heron pointed out, you do not want to whitewash history if you're trying to do a historical role-playing game. If you want to make your games to be like the John Wayne movies of the 1950s, by all means, feel free. It's your game table. You can do that. If you want to have every, good guy wearing a white hat and every villain wear a black hat, it's your game. You can do whatever you want. The reality is, in the West, there were a lot of shades of gray as far as what people were like. And those shades could change in a split second. So you can't whitewash the history, but you don't necessarily have to put the more problematic aspects of American history front and center on your game table. I mean, I personally wouldn't. That's just me. But once again, I'm just sharing my thoughts on bringing Old West role-playing games to life at your game table. So I think the most entertaining sort of role-playing games set in the American West would focus on a few different things. And I think the best campaigns could focus on specific events or specific types of campaigns. First thing I would recommend is try to make things epic, right? A cattle drive from Texas to Montana or Texas to Kansas that would be pretty epic. That's a great idea. Having a campaign where the player characters are kind of troubleshooters for one of the railroad companies, because they did exist. There were people out there who would go and investigate sabotage that was taking place on railroads, robberies, of course, train robberies, things like that. Easily incorporate that into it. A really epic Western game could be the settlement and growth of a community. I mean, just think of all the different things that you could utilize in that with that community, right? And of course, your player characters could be the sheriff, the marshal, saloon owner, yeah, the Swearingen character. Yeah, okay. And yes, of course, Deadwood is a fantastic Western. Just keep in mind that's not really the language they used. The whole point of that really vulgar language was to present that the people in these boom towns and mining towns and things like that would have used really blasphemous language, which would be, if somebody said, damn, oh, God damn them. Whoa, holy cow, that was a big deal. Daryl Errett's with us in chat. Hopefully I've said hello to most folks who are hanging on out. Peaceful Porcupine says they don't want to be boxed out of the hobby because people want to revel in the horror. Thankfully, we don't have a lot of people like that. Sadly, people do have experiences with some pretty bad eggs in our hobby. And when that takes place, it kind of takes the air out of their enthusiasm for this hobby. So that is sad to say, but thankfully, a great majority of the gamers out there don't have to deal with that kind of stuff. That they don't have to, well, okay, I'll take that back for a second. There are some folks out there who will swallow a lot of shit just to be able to play in a game. I am not one of those types. I would never be one of those types. Just so you know. But there are people out there who will put up with crap that most people shouldn't. But thankfully, a great many gamers out there, it's not an issue for. Dicel says, I guess in the final analysis, they're not a Native American or Mexican ethnicity origin, so they're not really sure how they might feel about this. What my approach always is, and this is coming from somebody who's run a lot of Call of Cthulhu set in the 1920s. I never put things like racism or misogyny or bias against gender or anything like that. I never put that front and center in a game. Will I make reference to something that is, accurate for that era? Yeah. But I won't, like, if my characters encounter somebody, if my players, I should say, encounter somebody who's supposed to be racist, I'm not going to go out of my way to portray that NPC to get that across. I would say something like, oh, he makes some really racist comments about XYZ NPC or whatever. There you go. Now you got the idea. The idea is firmly planted in my players' heads. Oh, yeah, this guy's a shit stain. And I don't, have to delve into any of that. Dicel says, if you're going to do a game about 18th century Russia, I'd be offended if you left out the treatment of the Jews in the Pale. I can understand that. W. Ford says, has there ever been a prison life role-playing game? I can see how problematic that could be. Yeah, I would think so. It being problematic, not that there is one. I wouldn't be shocked if there's one floating around out there. I don't know. Anyway, I am curious about that Tales of the West Kickstarter. Not enough to back it, but I am kind of curious about it. And I honestly think that if, as a game master, if you are a fan of history, and funny enough, a lot of role-playing game masters are history buffs. I think it kind of goes with the territory a little bit. I would say, you could really put together a very interesting campaign with the Old West. I really, really think you could. So I wonder. I'm gonna take a peek around, see what's out there that's been published outside of TSR stuff that's 30 years old and stuff like that. Peaceful Porcupine says, they're a native woman. I don't want to deal with realism and the horrible treatment from history. I already go to a therapist because of that. I'm not telling you have to. I mean, you don't even have to look at playing or running a Western game. You're not looking to play something or be involved in something that's gonna cause issues for you. So Chris Lundgren says, wasn't one of the original Boot Hill modules dealing with a claim jumper theme? I believe so. There was also one that was a local election. That's what I was going to say. That's another campaign that I think would go really nicely. Is I want to say I think that was called Bullets and Ballots or Ballots and Bullets. W. Ford says, how often do World War II role-playing games deal with the Holocaust? I think it takes the game out of the role-playing game. I agree. I would agree with that. I think I've told the story before, and then we're going to wrap this up. That Achtung Cthulhu was originally going to be published by Cubicle 7 Games. This is way back in the day. And Dominic McDowell had pointed out to the creator that he did not want anything like focused on the Holocaust, and he did not want anything which let the Nazis off the hook. Like, oh, well, they're only doing this because, they're influenced by the Necronomicon or any bullshit like that. He was like, I do not want that. He was like, he did not want to water down the horror of the Nazis with any mythos or any fiction. And when the finished product was delivered to him, it was not what he asked for. So he was like, I am not going to publish this. And that is when Chris Birch popped in. And that's why you may recall Cubicle 7 had World War Cthulhu, which was for Call of Cthulhu. It wasn't its own role-playing game. And if you ever saw any of those adventures or source books, it treated the real history respectfully, and it did not let the Nazis off the hook in any way, shape, or form. Carolyn says, personally, they've never really been interested in historical games. Their gaming is to escape from reality. I would look at it, it's along the same as people who enjoy a certain kind of movie. So if there are people out there who are really into horror movies, they tend to gravitate towards horror role-playing games, which, funny enough, I'm actually not that big a fan of horror films. I mean, there's some horror films I like. I'm not into the gross gore and stuff like that. I'm not into the, blow their arm off just because we can pull off that special effect and gross people out. I'm not my bag of tricks. So it is kind of funny that I have run so much Call of Cthulhu over the years. So that's kind of how, like people who like Star Wars movies or love Star Wars movies are really on into Star Wars role-playing games. Same thing with Star Trek. Or in a pinch, well, they'll just play science fiction role-playing games. So, yeah, you got that. You got that. So, Maddie C asks, what makes me hesitant regarding Tales of the West? I'm just, strangely enough, I share a lot of news for Kickstarters. I'm not necessarily huge on backing them because I never, as odd as this might sound, I just, who knows? Who knows what tomorrow is going to bring? So, and I have seen way too many Kickstarters get funded and then fall apart and not be delivered. So, so there's some discussion that's going on in chat right now that, I mean, this is kind of going in a direction that, I mean, that's not what the topic of tonight's show was. So, Dice Tales is pointing out historic games that address more recent history become a real headache. Yeah, I mean, that is the reality, right? So if you are going to play a game that's got any sort of foot in actual history, even if it's got a toe dipped into the actual history, there's gonna be some issues. Like I pointed out when I did my review, if you've seen my review of God's Teeth for Delta Green, I didn't give it a review score, and I pointed out it's a campaign I would not run at my game table because of the subject matter that's not necessarily on screen, but there are some topics, some subjects in the campaign that I don't want at my game table. It's just, I would not be entertained by. I don't think my players would be entertained by. But on the flip side of it, it is a really well-written adventure. And if it's looking to creep you out, there are some set pieces that are really fucked up that would certainly creep my players out and me. But I was like, I can't give it a score because I wouldn't run it. I just would not run it. All right. So that is it for this time out. Tomorrow's topic, I have no clue. I will mention on Thursday's show, it is going to be our September AMA. So it's my Ask Me Anything. So you can feel free to take part in that. If you want to email me a question ahead of time, you can at jeffmcaleer@thegaminggang.com. If you don't know how to spell my name, just go to thegaminggang.com and you will see the contact. Shoot me an email there if you got a question. There are a couple of questions that people have asked that I've not had an opportunity to answer. I am going to tackle those. And then we're also going to wrap up the role-playing game story time. And I am going to tell you the conclusion of the Mike the Zombie story for my Massive Nyarlathotep campaign from back in the 1980s. And I have to point out, I was talking to Elliot the other day, and he said he doesn't remember the end. He doesn't remember what happened. So it'll be entertaining for him too when he finds out. All righty then. So that's it for this time out. If you're watching live, thank you very much. If you watched live and took part in chat, bigger thank you, because not only are you hanging out, keeping me company, you're keeping each other company as well. But of course, I know a lot of folks, you're watching, you don't have an opportunity to watch live. Doesn't matter if you're watching live or on Memorex. Thank you very much for taking time out to watch any of the videos here on the Gaming Gang channel. And of course, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to visit gaminggang.com for all latest in tabletop gaming news, reviews, and a whole lot more you are not going to find here on YouTube. You know the drill. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. By all means, give the video a thumbs up if you like it. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you do subscribe, don't forget, ring that bell, because it'll not only let you know when the Dispatch streams live, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday evenings at 7 p.m. Central. Also let you know when I share other videos, such as my unboxing and first look at Pine Box, Texas Middle School for Savage Worlds Adventure Edition from Pinnacle Entertainment Group. You will see this video tomorrow. Yes. Everybody enjoy the rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time of day it is in your neck of the woods. Thank you very much for watching. Once again, I'm Jeff McAleer. And until I see you next time, I always hope all of you get to enjoy plenty of great gaming with your gang.